Okay, so here's the scenario. We've been given a movie file that in fact is a pre-conformed edit. So as we can see when we play it, we've got all the cuts are embedded in this movie. And I don't know where the cuts are, but I'd like to find them, and I'd like to separate this movie file out into all its separate cuts. Well, there's two ways of doing that on Mistika, depending on whether you do or do not have an edit list. So let's firstly look at if we don't have an edit list. Mistika has a scene detect, so to access the scene detect, just double click the clip that you want to have the scene detect run on. Again, this would open on the right hand monitor if you're on a dual GUI, and down here detect scenes. So simply click it and run the scene detection. So you can see that's just going through and it's looking for any sizable changes between the shots. What can I tell you about this project while it's doing that? Well, I can tell you it features a dog called Bertie that in the script had to be a dog called Bessie, so it had to be digitally changed from a boy dog to a girl dog. Anyway, fortunately that's finished doing its thing. So as you can see, what Mistika has done is it's given me a graph of changes, and the higher the line here, the greater the change, so more likely that's the position of a cut. Now I can change the sensitivity of the scene detect effectively by saying that anything that goes above this bar should be interpreted as a cut. Now needless to say, if I put it down here it would be cutting on practically every frame, and likewise up here it would miss most of the cuts. But logically we can see that it's likely to be here with question marks over whether that's a cut or that's a cut. Well, let's find out. So I'll press cut scenes, and if you were on a dual GUI you'd already see that on the left hand monitor on your timeline all the cuts have been put into place. So we can now see that the clip has been separated. So we can now see, for example, it did actually miss this cut here, I guess from a dark shot to a dark shot. So we now know that in fact we probably should have let our bar down here, in which case Mistika holds the data, so we can just simply press cut again, and now we have that cut in place. If we do get any false positives, as it were, for example here, there's a lot of changes in that shot because of people walking through frame. All I have to do is select both halves and press J for join, put it back together. And if we had any sections in the cut which are markedly different to the rest of the film, for example maybe there's a scene with lots of camera flashes, then of course I could select any one of these clips, and by double clicking I could do a scene detect just on that shot, just by running scene detection. Now if we do have an edit list, obviously that's likely to be faster and possibly more reliable. So if we have one we can use it, and the way we would derive the cut marks from an EDL is like this. So firstly what I'll do is I'll just select everything and press J for join. So now we're back to our single clip. To access the EDLs we go via the conform tab. We'll have a look at conforming properly in a future tutorial, so we'll just for now look at how we're going to get the master cut marks out of an EDL. So from the tabs to the side I'm going to select Mistika Clips, and then I'm going to press the EDL file box, and that will open up some dialog basically asking me where is the EDL. And I can use the buttons to find my way anywhere around the operating system, or indeed anywhere around a network to find an EDL. In my case I actually save the EDL into the import folder of my project. So it's here, I'll just double click it, and we get a confirmation here that it's found it. Now all of this section down here is all to do with Mistika trying to find some media for those events in the EDL. And in this instance I don't care about that, so I'm going to ignore all of it and just press perform. Now what Mistika does when you perform a conform is it's effectively done a conversion between the EDL and an environment, a timeline, and it's helpfully lit this one up. You can see that it's called something, online conform, which was the name of the EDL, underscore converted underscore EDL, which is what Mistika pops onto the end just to say that it was automatically generated. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just save this environment, all one clip of it. So I've pressed Control A to get the Save As dialog, and I'll call it my edit. The reason being is I want to open this environment instead, which is the one that's just generated. So I'm just going to double click it. So as you can see, what Mistika has done is created an edit, but it doesn't have any media, hence no thumbnails, because of course we didn't give it any clues as to where to find any media. But what it does have is all the edit marks. So what I'll do is I'll lasso everything and Control C for copy and go back to my original environment, which has my master clip in it. And I'm going to go Control Paste, and then likely I would line it up to the left. I press Tab to do that. Now in fact I would need to check this, because of course sometimes you end up with a situation where the EDL starts with the first frame of the movie, but in fact the movie itself might have some black on the beginning of it, or a title or something that effectively would offset the difference between the edits. So what I would do to check this is I would use the jump between edits function, which is Control right arrow and left arrow, to go to the head of each shot in the EDL, and then just using jog backwards and forwards, which is just left and right arrow on its own, I would just check there is actually an edit there. So for example, we can see that that edit is probably right. So let's just make sure it's not a fluke, go to the next edit, and yes, there's an edit there, and again there's an edit there. So I can be reasonably sure that these are aligned with the true edits inside here. So the question is how I get the edits from this piece of null media onto this piece of real media. And it's very simple. Under Edit we have a macro called Split Conform. Simply press it and there the edits are translated. Now let me just do that again, just to kind of show exactly what was going on. So again I'm just going to press J for join, put it all back together. What Split Conform does is it looks for any edits that this monitor line covers, and wherever it finds an edit it'll put a split on the entire vertical height of the timeline at that edit point. So for example, if my monitor is on this line here, the Split Conform will work. Again J for join to undo it. On the other hand, if my monitor did not include this line, you can see it's ending here, so it's not getting as far as here. If I went Split Conform now, nothing happens because the monitor isn't finding those edits. And the edits, when it finds them, it will put them on every entity on the timeline. So for example, if I was about to do a color grading session, I could add a color grade onto here, now run a Split Conform, making sure the monitor sees those edits. Edit, macro, Split Conform, and you can see it's also split my color corrector into helpful shot length clips. So those are the two ways of splitting a pre-conformed movie or sequence into its constituent shots.